You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News, the show that talks to newsmakers from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island and Long Islanders like you. So each week we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island just like you, and I want to know more about where my tax dollars are going, and I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. Well, today I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Robert Zimmerman, who is running for Congress in New York's 3rd Congressional District on the Democratic ticket, which covers northern Nassau County and a slice of suburban Queens. This is the seat that was vacated by Tom Suozzi. Mr. Zimmerman, welcome to this week's Long Island News.
Bill, it's good to be with you, and call me Robert. I'm just not that mature, okay?
Okay. Well, you know what? Let's start out by letting you introduce yourself to the listeners. And I know that you're the founder and owner of a public relations firm. And you know, why get into politics now? What's the main reason that you're running?
The real question you're asking is what I hear from so many of my friends and family. What the heck are you thinking? But let me just simply say to you, in terms of introducing myself, this is a congressional district I've lived in since I was 9 years of age. It's where I grew up. I went to our public schools. I worked for members of Congress representing this district. First for Congressman Lester Wolf when I was a high school kid, later became a senior member of his staff. Jim Scheuer when he represented this district, and Gary Ackerman got me for free because I was building my business at the time. My firm is now in its 33rd year. It's a communications firm. We're proud of that and proud of what it represents. And, you know, I'm running for Congress because everything I believe in is on the line. In fact, John Meacham described this midterm election as the most defining since the Civil War, in terms of the importance it has for the direction and future of our country, as we work to make sure we protect our democracy, as we stand up to rebuild our economy as we emerge from COVID. So these are the issues on the line. And for me, this is a great honor to be the Democratic nominee. When I was growing up on Long Island as a closeted gay kid in the 70s, and it was a very isolating, very lonely time. It was a time where I used to hang out in the diner, quite frankly, because I didn't want to admit to my folks I didn't have a date for a dance, you know. Those people fortunately don't have to relive those days, but I remember what it was like when it was suggested to me I try conversion therapy. I wasn't going to do that, of course, but that says something. But it's hard to shake. Maybe you were sick when you're growing up. Wow. And frankly, I never dreamed we'd have a member of the LGBTQ plus community representing Long Island and Queens in Congress, least of all that I'd be that person.
Right.
So it's a very important time. And it says a lot about the opportunity here to stand up for many important issues I believe in. And it really, in this race also, and this issue, amongst others, highlights the dramatic differences between myself and my opponent.
Well, it's funny because, it's not funny. That's the thing. In the last, 50 years, I guess, we've come a long way. I mean, we really have. Just the general public's acceptance of a lot of things that were not accepted for so long. And it would seem at this point in time, we're starting to go back.
Well, that's exactly the point. I have so many parents of young children who approach me concerned about their children's future, their safety and security, because their children are part of the LGBTQ plus world, and they're concerned about it. You have legislation like the Don't Say Gay legislation popping up now in 19 states. Now there's a federal version of it emerging. And my opponent, who also is openly gay, supports that kind of legislation, the Don't Say Gay legislation, which is really designed for one purpose, just to create further divisions and to create, just to ostracize people and to create a concept of people who are part of the community being the other, if you will. In fact, my opponent, George Santos, actually proudly embraces Marjorie Taylor Greene, the QAnon congresswoman, and Matt Gaetz, two individuals who are famous for their homophobia and such severe bigotry that even the Republican leadership denounced Marjorie Taylor Greene for anti-Semitism. Yet George Santos said he's proud to call her a friend and said he likes her more than other Republicans. And so that word, it should concern all of us. Because it's not about being gay, it's about standing up for the safety, social justice, and protection of all of us. That's what it's about, how you serve the community. And so that's one of the very big issues that I have with my opponent, Mr. Santos. And I think his embrace of extremism is just dangerous and reprehensible, and what's wrong right now with our country.
Good points. Good points. All I shake my head every time a woman tells me she's going to vote for a Republican. I was riding in on the car and listening to reports about the women in Iran who are out in the streets shaking their fists
heroically and very bravely.
Yeah, right. And it may I don't know. It could be the difference. And I don't understand in America why women aren't out in the streets doing the same thing.
There are so many women. First of all, I still have such admiration for the women of Iran and for those standing up with them. They're true freedom fighters, and our government has to stand with the people against this oppressive, monstrous regime and take every step they can to help support those who are standing up for their safety, and so the women and the courageous freedom fighters of Iran. Yeah. But I must tell you, I'm very moved by how women have motivated and moved so many other people into political action. This issue of reproductive freedom, the issue of standing up for abortion rights so that women have the right to a safe and legal abortion. This was our law for 50 years in our country. And to see an extremist Supreme Court overturn it and supported by extremist Republicans in Congress. And for that matter, my opponent. Yeah. Once again, George Santos, where I stand for reproductive rights for women, abortion, or their right to a safe and legal abortion. He's actually advocated a national ban on abortions with no exceptions, even for New Yorkers. He's advocated prosecuting doctors who provide abortion assistance, even mocked women, saying they would use rape as an excuse to get an abortion. Right. And now he's, I think one of the reasons we call this the third congressional district is that George Santos has taken 3 positions on virtually every issue. Now he says he supports the exception of rape. However, the woman has got to get a police documentation that she was raped. That could take forever. Yeah. And of course, many women don't want to go to the police for many other reasons. They shouldn't have to be forced to relive the trauma and tragedy of rape just so they meet George Santos' standard. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think that people that think that these things just happened, I believe, are sorely mistaken. This was a well thought out approach. In my mind, we had 3 Supreme Court judges during their confirmations that lied.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They consistently said that this was settled law. Roe v. Wade was settled law. We're not going there. And the first thing they did
was go there.
I think all gay people, certainly gay people who are married, what's the trajectory? What do you think is next?
Oh, by the way, they're very clear. They're going after issues regarding personal relationships that are consensual. That Clarence Thomas had made it very clear that marriage equality is on the line. And he, by the way, was one of the earliest judges to say that they were going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now he's targeting marriage equality. And we can't in any way be overconfident that it's guaranteed. It's my hope that Congress will codify it into law. It's essential they do. Yeah. But let's understand, it's this issue for sure. But also let's look at the recent decision by the court to literally limit the right of the EPA to enforce environmental protection and address greenhouse gas emissions, limiting their role in doing that. And that's going to be a precedent to now limit OSHA's ability to go after workplace violations and enforce workplace safety standards.
Yeah, well, there's another issue. There's another issue that people overlook is the rights of the consumer. When I was a kid, we opened a box of cookies. It never crossed our mind that there'd be something in there that would hurt us.
That's right.
Just never did. And now, thankfully, people are actually reading ingredients.
Yeah. But expiration dates too.
These companies sometimes to put out a product that could hurt people. To them, sometimes it's the cost of doing business. So we have to pay a few. Yeah, we have to pay a few people a couple of $1 million, but we're going to make out. So let's do it anyway.
One of the real problems we have, and many studies have shown this, when corporations are found guilty by the National Labor Relations Board of engaging in anti-union activity, firing union organizers, or subjecting employees to union bashing meetings, they're found guilty, they pay a fine, and go back to business as usual.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is so wrong.
There's There's another thing that I don't get either, is that people see this. Amazon's recent, I'll call it an assault on union organizing. I think they spent somewhere upwards of $43 million to stop that from happening. And now, don't people get the idea that if corporations are that worried about it, that a union must be a fairly strong entity?
Well, Bill, here's the good news. If you look at the national surveys that have been conducted in the past 6 months, while respect for so many institutions is dropping, like the Supreme Court, and certainly Congress and other standard institutions, the support for unions is at a record high level because people realize that unions provide, especially after we emerge out of this pandemic, a pathway for job security, growth into the middle class, and a safe and secure economic future. And so it's wonderful to see the growth of unions emerge in this difficult time in our country, and the support unions have is really wonderful to see. So that's very encouraging, very exciting to see. And you're seeing around the country more and more union organized, Amazon, Starbucks, and the like.
Right.
Very, very encouraging to see that.
I don't think the middle class has a shot without the unions and the idea.
That's why I support the PRO Act.
Yeah, collective bargaining.
That's right. Make sure that unions, make sure people can more readily join unions.
Yeah.
And that's why I support strengthening the National Labor Relations Board.
Excellent. Well, let me get to my list of things that.
Sure.
So I have here. I know you recently had a debate with Newsday, and you.
I didn't have a debate with Newsday. It was a
right.
Newsday-sponsored debate with George Santos. Yeah.
They sponsored it, and George Santos was there. Yeah. So George says that you were a rubber stamp for the Biden administration. How do you respond to that?
Let me point out to you, George Santos and I had 2 debates, and he's canceled every one after that, which I think tells you something about the legitimacy of his arguments and the fact he couldn't face the scrutiny.
Well, we both have history. I've interviewed George, so I know where you're at.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Bill. That being said, let me be very clear. I am not going to Congress to represent the Democratic Party or representing the Biden administration. If I'm given the privilege of serving in Congress, I'm going to be representing the communities of our congressional district in Nassau and Queens. And there are many aspects of the Biden administration that I think are important, like the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the largest investment in 50 years in our infrastructure, so critical to our property values, making sure our water is protected, our water quality is protected, making sure we repair our roads and the like. But there are times when I've felt the Biden administration should do more, and I've differed with the Biden administration. I think they should make an urgent priority restoring the state and local tax deduction. I think that's essential.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be part of any future tax policy agenda.
The thing is who did I answer? I spoke to, I forget who it was, but I get the feeling that in order to overturn this SALT thing, someone was remarking that it could take 3 years.
Well, it sunsets. The SALT could be restored at the end of 2025. The way the law was written, SALT was taken, the state and local tax deduction was taken away from us through 2025. Now, Congress and the Republican Congress will do this, because they've been very clear about this. They will continue denying the state and local tax deduction to us if they're in the majority. At the end of 2025, though, it could just expire, and we could get the state and local tax deduction back then. I don't want to wait till 2025.
Yeah,
I want SALT restored now. It's the oldest federal tax deduction. It's been a commitment. People bought their homes and came here based upon that commitment. And it's patently unfair to everyone on the economic spectrum who was taken away from us.
Yeah, and it means $15 billion to the local economy.
That's right. And let's just remember, this was taken away from us in the Trump tax cut legislation.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that's also, I'd like to see the Biden administration be much tougher on Saudi Arabia, because after all, we provide 70% of their airplane parts and weaponry, and they can't go any other place to get that equipment. So I think we should be much more aggressive in dealing with them in terms of the way they've responded to us.
Yeah, well,
the oil price.
And we should remember that as the gas prices go up, because what did they stop? 2 million or 2 million barrels a day less that they're going to put out there. So,
and I'd also want to see the Biden administration more aggressively go after price gouging. But I must say, while I have certainly those policy differences with them, I very much applaud the bipartisan initiatives they put forward to reinvest in domestic manufacturing with the semiconductor chip program, and scientific research. Very much appreciate what they did with the bipartisan gun safety legislation, which my opponent opposes. Right. Doesn't believe in any need for new gun laws. Yeah. And also, most recently, the legislation signed into law that will reduce the cost of prescription drugs for our elderly Medicare recipients, reduce the healthcare premiums people under the Affordable Care Act have to face. And once again, my opponent, George Santos, even opposed that. And frankly, while we're all fighting, the idea of a member of Congress from Long Island and Queens actually opposing the laws to reduce the cost of prescription drugs or opposing a bipartisan infrastructure bill. Recently, I made it very clear I'm standing strongly with Social Security. I need to protect it and in fact, enhance it. Mm-hmm. George Santos' campaign to privatize it. Mm-hmm. If you privatize Social Security, you end it. That's how it works. Yeah. Think about our Social Security recipients. Think about what their life would be like if they had to depend upon the stock market fluctuations or the economy through privatization of Social Security.
Hey, they should be so lucky if they have those outlets. If they even, there are a lot of people who are just on Social Security.
That's right.
They don't even
they have to count on it.
They don't even get to dream about Wall Street or about,
they've got to count on it. If you privatize it, you end it. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So I'm pointing out the differences because, quite frankly, George Santos will give you very different answers today than he gave 6 months ago.
Yeah. Well, there's another issue.
And elections, I just want to say, Bill, elections are about making choices. I have a responsibility to tell you where I stand, as does my opponent, and the voters decide. And regrettably, my opponent not only will not tell you where he stands, he changes his position on a regular monthly basis.
Well, there you go. And this is a really big issue in all politics today, and that's the truth and the lies. There's your dichotomy.
And by the way, if I could say, Bill, nothing better reflected that point you're bringing up than the response to the 2020 election. Mm-hmm. When you had Donald Trump's top advisors say this election was safe and secure. His attorney general said it. His FBI director said it. Mm-hmm. His director of his director of election security, all these people he appointed said the election was not stolen. It was safe and secure. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump, just for political gain and political greed, mobilized people to spread the lie, to undermine our Constitution and democracy. And once again, my opponent, George Santos, he attended the Stop the Steal rally.
Yeah, you're speaking in the past tense, though. He's still doing it.
That's okay, even better. He's still doing it.
The insurrection continues. It goes on.
And by the way, if we don't recognize that and call it out, they'll do it again. I mean, my opponent in this election, George Santos, he actually paid the legal fees for the rioters, the insurrectionists at Capitol Hill, and defended their right to be in the Capitol.
Yeah, I did read that.
After their violence resulted in police officers dying, over 100 police officers being injured, many had to be hospitalized. Yeah. So he's no one to talk about standing up for law enforcement, standing up for public safety, or our Constitution. He's contributed to the lawlessness.
But I've spoken to quite a few politicians, and I try to bring up this idea that how do we get the bad yeast out of the loaf? The Bible talks about that one little bit of bad yeast doesn't just stay in a loaf, and it's not the only bad thing. It turns the whole loaf bad. So now we have propaganda. Look, Devin Nunes quit Congress. He stopped. He's not a senator anymore because he took a job as a CEO of a propaganda machine.
Of course.
So what is that? That told me immediately that apparently Republicans think there's more power in propaganda than there is in Congress.
Well, I'll tell you this, Bill. I'll tell you this. One of the ways we stop the misinformation that is undermining our democracy, undermining our Constitution, undermining our public safety is by standing up to the lies. All of us can just go to our iPhone, go to our Amazon, whatever our Android, whatever our phone, whatever our mobile device is, and just fact check any piece of information. Reuters, the Wall Street Journal, the Associated Press, they all have the facts. Mm-hmm. They'll do fact check analysis. We can get the truth. We've never had more access to facts. And unfortunately, people have less interest in it than ever before. Yeah. So I think we've got to focus on facts. And we also have to focus on, when we vote, to base our vote around the facts. And what worries me is people hear all sorts of back and forth noise and just tune it out.
Yeah.
You know something? We have an obligation to our democracy and to our nation to rise above the noise, get the information, and make our decision, participate in our democracy based upon the facts.
Yeah, I think more people, they call it research, and I think it's bias confirmation. That's all it is. I found
But
something.
people want news to feel good about themselves.
Right, I found something that agrees with me. I'll read this whole article. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yes, it can change, and it will change. I think we've seen that process begin. We saw, look, the fact that Donald Trump was defeated, and many of the people who spread the misinformation he did were defeated 2 years ago.
Well, you know what is on my mind, though, is that idea that whatever administration is in power at the time, if people don't like a couple of things, well, the next time the vote comes around, we'll vote for the other guys. Let them give it a shot. And I think that people have that attitude without remembering what we went through for 4 years.
I don't know about that. I think people are very focused on issues like affordability, which are very critical to me, especially living in this congressional district. They're focusing on issues like reproductive freedom, protecting our democracy. But most of all, people want to stand up for mainstream values against extremism. And that's the point. I've worked in a bipartisan way. I've worked in a bipartisan way with Republicans in Congress, with Republicans in local government. I worked with Peter King to make sure we broke a congressional deadlock to have the Soroga 9/11 healthcare bill put through to help our first responders.
Right.
I worked with Don Clavin in the town of Hempstead on the pandemic relief. George Santos can't point to one Democrat who will ever acknowledge he worked in a bipartisan way in Congress or in local government.
George Santos never won an election in Nassau County, or he's never been in an elected office.
Well, I'm not in elective office either, but I still have been engaged in public policy and public service.
Right.
And unfortunately, George is not.
Right. There's another interesting thing here. You were pretty outspoken about ghost guns. Can you tell us exactly what is a ghost gun?
It's a manufactured gun that, it doesn't have a serial number, so it can't be traced. Mm-hmm. And I mean, think about it. You can't buy a blender today without a serial number. Right. And so my point to you is we need to have, and this to me is the moral test of our country. And frankly, it's a big division between myself and George Santos again. And I keep going back to it because we have an election in 2.5 weeks. We have to make decisions. Mm-hmm. And that is, I'm a strong advocate for safe gun safety legislation, strong and certain gun safety legislation. We've got to get assault weapons off the street. Teenagers shouldn't have access to buying them. We've got to make sure that we close the gun show loopholes so people can use those loopholes to buy guns without going through background checks. We have to have red flag laws in place, increase our mental health funding to address these issues. And we have made progress in that regard. But we have to make sure that people don't have to worry about their children going to school or shopping in a shopping mall or being in a church or synagogue or mosque and being the victim of gun violence. It is an epidemic in our country. I believe in gun safety legislation. I've been endorsed by Linda Beagle-Schulman for my work on the issue, as I've been endorsed by former Congresswoman Carolyn McCarthy. George Santos is very clear. He doesn't believe in any need for new gun safety legislation. He stands with the gun manufacturers. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note, I'm not talking about taking guns away from people who have a right to have them for public safety or for hunting or sportsman activities. Yeah. I'm talking about making sure we stop the illegal flow of guns. Most important way is going after those who bring illegal guns into our state, who traffic in illegal guns across state lines. George Santos has said he doesn't believe in any new laws are needed to address that either. Yeah. And it's a national tragedy.
Yeah. Oh, there are so many things. When I asked you why politics, why now, I was thinking more about the total atmosphere, gridlock and, party gridlock. We all talk about bipartisan stuff, but you don't see a lot of it. And then you do see one party just voting no on everything. There's a droga bill. You mentioned it. It took a long time to get that to work.
Sure did. But we do see there are opportunities for bipartisanship. I mean, for example, protecting the Long Island Sound has always had strong bipartisan support in Congress. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the new Congress will look like, but I want to make sure we work in a bipartisan way to get that done. Standing up for veterans affairs, veterans assistance, has always been very bipartisan. We have to improve the Northport VA. We've got to retrofit it with infrastructure funds. We've got to make sure our veterans are protected. That's always been a bipartisan issue.
Right.
And that's why I supported the bipartisan infrastructure bill to get the dollars in so we can do that kind of work.
Yeah.
And so I think there is an ability to work in a bipartisan way. I know I can do it because I've done it. I'm the only one in this race for Congress who can say that.
Well, it sounds good to me. You make sense.
I appreciate that, Bill. Thank
Robert.
you so much.
I don't know. I shake my head and I just look at the atmosphere of trying to govern anything in in this atmosphere is very difficult. I think we need to strain out the dirt, if you will. If I was going to drink dirty water from a pond, I'd want to at least run it through a sock before I, before
I got a better idea. How about using our infrastructure funds to make sure we can protect our water quality supply? The real test for the next Congress, now we have the money appropriated, is making sure the money's delivered locally.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to work on doing for Queens and Nassau County.
You know what? I have an idea for you, and park this in the back of your head, because to me, this makes more sense than anything. Bill Nye had about 8 specials on the Sci-Fi Channel about all things that could end the world. And one of the things he brought up was, we talk about renewable energy, and we have arguments about where we're going to put the windmills and where we're going to put the this. And he brought up a great idea, and it's geothermal. He said, all we got to do is dig a hole and put a pipe in the ground close to the natural source of energy that's in the middle of our planet. We then pour cold water down there, and guess what comes up? Steam. And it'll run every machine there is. And we won't be arguing about renewing it or any of that once that system got working. We wouldn't be worried about when the sun came out or when it stayed in or how much wind there was. Why is nobody talking about that?
I'm sure it's out there on the table. Look, who am I to argue with Bill Nye, the science guy?
Yeah, right.
But I certainly would look into what he's saying for sure.
I just think it's, it seems like a great idea, and I've never heard it before.
I'll look into it.
Not that I'm, I'm not the sharpest crayon in the box either, but
you do very well.
I'm hanging in there. Well, you know what? I do get to talk to people like you who are the newsmakers and the guys doing things. I wish you all the best out there.
Thank you, Bill.
It's a really crummy atmosphere.
It is. It's a crummy atmosphere. I try to keep focused on issues and focused on public service. It's been the dream of my life since I was a kid working on Capitol Hill and used to watch the debates in the gallery. To have the opportunity to serve in Congress. And I hope I have that privilege, and I hope that I have that support to restore really mainstream values, the ability to work across the aisle, to bring home services to our communities and our congressional district. It'd be the great honor of my life. I hope to have that privilege in about 2.5 weeks. So we'll find out.
Okay. Well, we wish you the best.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Just to let my listening audience know, my guest has been Mr. Robert Zimmerman, who is running for Congress in New York's 3rd Congressional District on the Democratic ticket. And again, we thank you for being here. I hope we can reach out again for more insight soon. Oh,
I look forward to it.
Great. And try and get some sleep, huh? I know.
Okay, I'll do my best.
I know
it's
that's
only after November 8th. That'll be okay.
That's the last thing on the list, though, right? That's the last thing you get to do.
Thanks so much.
That's wild. Thank you very much for spending the time with us. And, the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to get on out of here. I would remind you to listen every Friday at 3 p.m. right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.